Hey everyone, it's November 23rd, 2016. I am in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, here at BJJ Fighclub with Professor Alex, is it Roque or Roque?
Roque.
Roque.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, and thanks for taking the time to do this interview. That's awesome. So before we get into things on this, can you tell us a bit about your martial arts background? You started pretty young, right?
Yeah, I'm actually from Brazil, and one of the most, I guess, popular sports in Brazil, everybody thinks it's soccer, but it's not. It's actually martial arts, specifically karate, judo, and jiu-jitsu. Okay, so there's plenty of other martial arts that are gaining popularity, but karate, judo, and jiu-jitsu have always been very popular, and they have actually grown the past 10 years. When I was a little kid, I was living in Manaus, deep in the Amazon with my dad. I was 5 years old. He was training in karate, shooting real style. And while he was training, he would place me in the judo classes for kids. So I trained for a couple of years in judo until we moved down south, where my father opened up a dojo, and then he started teaching me karate ever since then, right? So I was training in karate with him up until the mid-'80s. Even when we moved to Canada in '83, we would do a lot of home training, and then afterwards in '86, we moved back to Brazil, and he decided to no longer continue training karate. So I had to go out on my own and find a dojo. I signed myself up in Shotokan Karate, and I kept on training this style up until 1995 when I got my black belt in Shotokan Karate. Prior to that, a couple years earlier, 93, 94, I started with my father also training Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. This was back here in Canada, right? We moved quite a few times. But we didn't know that there was a difference in Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, we're Brazilians. We have only Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. And so we came here and we started training Jiu-Jitsu, and you know, we're doing all kinds of self-defense, wrestle out. Great stuff, you know, I love it. But we were wondering when we're going to be learning the Rickson Gracie triangle choke, for instance, right? And it just didn't happen. Pretty soon we realized, oh, we're thinking of a different jiu-jitsu. Okay. Yeah. And which hadn't happened here in Canada yet, right? So we realized that the only way we're going to learn at that time period was if we were learning on our own. So my father bought the Gracie instructional videotapes. Okay, yeah. You remember those? Yeah. And we started learning, me and him. We started training with each other. And pretty soon my father got a little bit busy. He had actually built some mats on the basement, and he got busy. So I started calling my friends over. This was back in 1995, just after I got my black belt. And, you know, every weekend we would get together, have a great time just killing each other, not knowing what we're doing. But we were learning, right? And we're having a great time. And pretty soon one of my friends says, hey, Alex, why don't you start up a club? And, you know, that, I guess, was the point where I said, hey, maybe I can do something here to actually bring this martial art to Calgary. And I was going to SAIT at the time. So at SAIT, I opened up the first Jiu-Jitsu, I guess, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
SAIT, that's the club,
Southern Alberta Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
That's where I was studying. And they gave us a basement shooting range, right? Full of lead poisoning, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how long I have to live. But they didn't have actual mats. There were those yoga mats that we tried to piece together. And, you know, I was pretty nervous the first day that we were supposed to start up. It was late January and everything. I put up posters. I called it SAIT Ground Fighting Club, right? And so the first day we had about 36 people show up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was crazy. And I didn't know anything. I was just showing stuff that I saw in the Gracie videotapes, right?
So you weren't, like, at that point you hadn't really been graded yet?
I didn't have an instructor.
Oh, really?
It was just out of the videotapes that I was learning. There were no Jiu-Jitsu people here. Huh. There were just the traditional Jiu-Jitsu guys. Yeah. Where I was learning from. I actually got to orange belt at the traditional styles. Okay. But as far as Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I didn't know of anybody in Canada that was actually teaching Jiu-Jitsu. So I just started the club out of, it was an interest group, right, type of thing. And I didn't know it was actually going to become a Jiu-Jitsu club. I just wanted to train Jiu-Jitsu, and I needed people to come in so I could teach them a little bit so they could get on top of me and give me a hard time, and I could just start fighting, right? Yeah. And, the mats would slide, everybody would fall, break their elbows, head on the floor, that kind of stuff. But we just loved it. Everybody ate it up. So pretty soon we started doing 2-3 classes a week and so on. And people started coming in. We actually ended up getting some good mats, ones that didn't fall apart. And it went from there, right? And then eventually in 1997, I ended up hearing of this Brazilian guy that was doing a seminar up in Edmonton. His name was Marcos Soares. I would later become associated with him for 7 years. And he became my instructor after this point.
And Marcos Soares back then was same as today's Vancouver, right?
Yeah, he moved to Vancouver. I'm not exactly sure if it was 95 or 96 that he had moved to Vancouver, but I met him in 97. Okay. Okay. And he had already his club established in Vancouver. And, about once, maybe twice a year, I'd go down there. I was a student, poor guy, and didn't have any money. I would drive all the way there, train as much as I could over a weekend, come back home. Once a year, I'd bring him out here for a seminar for a whole weekend. I remember there was one time we brought him for an 8-hour-long seminar.
An 8-hour long?
8 hours.
Wow.
4 hours, break, another 4 hours. And, we were crazy back then. We did what needed to be done. And that was that. But unfortunately, the distance, over 1,000 kilometers between us, it was difficult to train, especially because I didn't have the financial means to come and go as I pleased. So we would just milk him dry and then work on those techniques for the next 6 to 8 months because we didn't know when we were going to be able to see him again, right? Yeah. And that's how the club progressed and everything. My grading situation wasn't the best because I was living here, he was living there. I didn't train constantly under Marcos, so I was actually one of the longest white belts ever. I was white belt for over 4.5 years. Okay. Before I was finally moved to blue belt under Marcos, right? And my whole journey from where I started before I even met Marcos all the way up to my black belt award was a total of 16 years.
Oh, right? That's a lot of determination.
Yeah. 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 So when people come to me and say that 8 years for a black belt's too long, you don't know what long is.
Yeah, really. Yeah. So let's go back a bit now. So when you started training at age of 4 in Brazil, right?
Yeah. Actually 5.
5. Yeah. Okay. And you said you started in karate first?
No, judo.
Judo, okay.
And then a couple years later, I went to karate.
Okay. And yeah, so I've always heard that, judo is really big there.
Yes.
And that even though it's called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it wasn't really popular back then.
No, there was always Jiu-Jitsu. We just called it Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. Never called it Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, never called it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That happened once it was moved to North America and introduced here by way of UFC, I guess. Yeah. Back then, Jiu-Jitsu wasn't seen in a good light. Okay. And that's, I don't want to talk bad about the Gracies, but that's the Gracie family's fault. Okay. Because they were so eager to prove that Jiu-Jitsu was a viable and an effective martial art that they would do challenges. They would pick fights on the beach. They would, my own instructors in Manaus, they weren't judo teachers. They were jiu-jitsu teachers from Rio.
Okay.
They moved to Manaus to start jiu-jitsu, but nobody wanted to learn jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
So they started doing judo for kids, and then they would go out on the streets and pick up fights with anybody that they could to prove that jiu-jitsu was the best. And I guess that was the wrong way to go about it, but that's the way that they had to promote themselves and to call attention to the martial art, right? And
it's just so crazy to think about that. Like, I've watched a few documentaries about the challenges back in that day, and it's like, just to think of that now, like to think like, hey, you know, what if nowadays in the city I'm in, that happened where, you know, if anyone off the street would come in and be like, hey, I challenge your school, kind of thing. It's just like kind of mind blowing to think about that now. Because I mean, we have tournaments and stuff, but it's not at the level that was those challenges where that was like everything like the whole school's honors on that. Yeah.
So I grew up in Brazil during those years of Dojo Challenges. And people just walking in and wanting to challenge anybody there in the dojo, or a group of people walking in. When I was 18, I was ready to come back to Canada. I was training in Shotokan Karate in my dojo, and we had a dojo tournament inside the dojo, and the reason was, the way they told us was that we were getting ready for a state championships.
Okay.
But I know that that's not the real case. The real case is that they had the rivalry with another dojo, and they were, I don't know who was planning to invade who, but during that challenge, that everybody in the dojo, we had a dojo tournament. We fought each other.
Yeah.
And teeth were flying, black eye, blood everywhere, no protection, nothing. We were going real hard for teenagers, and I ended up in second place. I got a little silver medal. And, because of this experience and this memory and how hard it was, this is actually my favorite medal that I ever got.
Your hardest earned one.
It was, yes. Yeah. It was a really tough challenge. And this is what you got to expect in Brazil. This is what, you can expect at any point. Somebody walks in and they make a dojo challenge, and then you got to represent your club, and nobody's going to have any mercy on anybody else.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So then you moved back to Canada for, like, the last time you moved here, like, for good, you were 18?
Yes, I moved here when I was 18, yes.
And then slowly got into that club. That reminds me of reading the book, the Jiu-Jitsu Globetrotter, Christian Gergart. I'm hoping I'm not murdering your last name. Because he was talking about how, like, when he was first learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu up in Copenhagen, how there wasn't really any clubs that he can get to regularly that were like hours away, and it was just him and a group of friends, and they had some tapes, or what was it, they went to one seminar and just worked off those techniques for the rest of the year, and that's I was reminded of when you're talking about that club. And it's cool to think about, that's how it started. It's kind of like underground music, with the bootleg tapes and people forming bands, and then those bands being these huge bands that we listen to nowadays, kind of thing, right? It's really neat to see that, hear that. So you were the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club in Calgary.
Yes, we were the first. Officially, we started in '96.
Okay.
In January of '96, at SAIT.
Yeah.
A few years later, we moved, but yes, the next Jiu-Jitsu club didn't show up until, I believe, 2001.
Huh. Wow.
That's
like when UFC.
Yeah, I could be wrong about this, but this is something. I believe it was 2000, 2001 when the next club showed up besides mine.
And so how was it, like you said, like right off the bat you were getting like 30 people out?
Yeah, that's, because everybody was watching Ultimate Fighting, and everybody was interested in this topic, right? So I got in a very good situation. Like, this was a non-profit club that I had. All the money paid was going to SAIT, and it was going to fund trips and seminars and stuff like that, right? As a matter of fact, I was the first person in Calgary, from Calgary, to compete.
Oh, really?
In '96, yes. When I heard that there was going to be a tournament in Toronto, and Rickson Gracie was going to be there.
Oh.
Okay, let's take some of those funds. I took a student with me, and we both went to Toronto.
And that was '96, you said?
Yeah, '96.
So that was shortly after, like, the big, like, Valley Tour in Japan.
Exactly, yeah. Everybody was talking about that, and Hexen was so popular. And so we went there, and my student, he got scared, so he didn't even leave the airport.
He didn't want to compete?
He stayed the whole weekend in the airport. I don't know what happened to him, right? He just freaked out. And but I went to our destination. Like, we had separate flights, but I went to my destination. Was I can't remember the name of the dojo that we dojo crashed in right now, unfortunately. Guys were really nice. They offered the dojo for us. There were people from Winnipeg there, including Joe Dorkson.
Okay.
He was just a skinny kid at that time, him and his brother. They wouldn't stop, right? Even we were supposed to be sleeping, and they were rolling in the gym and fighting. Then the next day we had the seminar, and whenever they had the chance, they were rolling and fighting. And the next day, in between fights, they were fighting with each other. Those guys, I don't know what they ate, but it was just amazing to watch the amount of energy that they had, right? But I met Rob McRoberts there from Winnipeg as well. I met some really, really good people from the grassroots of Jiu-Jitsu in Canada.
Nice.
And, this Rickson Gracie seminar was great. And I don't know if you ever noticed how Rickson rolls, but he doesn't do anything what I call fancy.
No.
He's got a very basic jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And that's how his seminar was. He only taught us one thing, how to shrimp out properly. The whole 3 hours. But that's exactly what I needed to learn at that point in my career, was how to shrimp out properly. And it made a world of difference when I came back. And it was, to this day, it was the best money I've ever spent and best seminar I've ever been to in terms of what I needed at that point in time.
Well, that's amazing. Like, I can just imagine. Like, I can't even imagine being in a seminar with Hexen. That's like, obviously it's got to be everyone's dream to be able to train under them, right? To do a seminar with them. I remember we did a seminar with Pedro Sauer.
Yes.
And he, I think, for a good portion of it, at least maybe an hour, I remember going through 2 techniques where, like, how to properly have a closed guard, and how to properly upa, right? And his little details that he had to them. I remember one of the students was like, "Oh, I'm glad after 5 years I now know how to properly close my guard," right? Yeah, just the details they have, right?
No, the little details makes a world of difference, and that's what I'm all about, right?
Yeah. So, Marcus Soares.
Yes.
So you heard about him.
Yes.
You did a seminar with him and ended up being underneath him for a while. For, I guess, how long now? Quite a while now, right? Mm-hmm. Do you ever get him out?
No. Ever since 2002, we went our separate ways.
Okay.
And I trained under other people. But I mean, I have the world of respect for Marcus Soares. He's a great teacher. His knowledge is unquestionable. His technique, he produces fighters. And, I got the foundation from Marcus Soares, and I consider my jiu-jitsu founded under his teaching. And, that's what I've gained from him, and I pass it on to my students to this day.
Yeah, I've yet to actually be in any of his seminars, classes, but I've always heard, like, great things about how he runs, like, everything. I have a friend who's also underneath who's underneath Marcus Soares. The reason I was asking about bringing him out is that you were saying like when you were first starting, there's videos right from him because it was too expensive to go over there. So what I was wondering was like doing seminars. Was that like kind of your not primary, but invested way of learning moves at first?
Yes, I mean, like I said, he was there, we were here.
Yeah.
And he had his club that he was running, and it's understandable, he didn't have anybody else to run the club while he was gone. So he couldn't spend too much time with us. And this is something that I was always asking him to spend more time with us.
Yeah.
And actually teach us properly, because there's no substitution for having a great black belt teaching you on a day-to-day basis. But unfortunately, we only had him for like a weekend.
Yeah.
And you know, even though I tried my best and to absorb all the techniques and to train them and to teach them at the same time, we were always lagging behind in terms of effectiveness compared to his students that had the benefit of having him there every single day. And you know, this is one of the reasons why I ended up going with other teachers in the future. It was because some other people were more willing to spend actual amount of times with us to help us get to where we needed to be, right? It was a combination of things, I guess. But like I said, I have full respect for him, and I never questioned his ability to teach himself as a person, and I owe my start to him.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. The question wasn't directed at him specifically, just at seminars in general. So, like, you a fan of getting out and getting to as many seminars as possible?
Yes.
I know there's quite a few clubs now. I imagine there's got to be quite a few people that come by here during the year in Calgary.
You know what, my view on seminars has shifted a little bit as I progressed with my training. What I find is, there's two types of instructors. The type of guy who's a super athlete, and he can do things that I can't, and he teaches that. And to me, it's great, but I can't absorb that. And to 99% of the population out there, they're in the same boat as me, right? I got bad knees, I'm old, and I just don't move the same way as those people.
It's like it's more geared to the younger kids, right?
Yeah. It's geared to the younger crowd, and younger kids eat it up and everything. I like seminar teachers, I like instructors that will have more of a heavy game, a solid game, controlling. I like learning the little things. I can take a seminar of berimbolo, and how to do 5 ways of sweeping with a berimbolo, and that's all great, and I'll do it, but that's not the way I'm going to fight. And it's great to know the berimbolo so I can stop it, but that's not the way I'm going to fight, right? I'm going to fight the way somebody's going to show me something, how to do it a little bit more effective than I already know, and then that's going to stick with me a lot faster than going over my head and sweeping the guy. That's just the way I am. I really like Keith Owen's seminars.
Oh yeah, his foundation is always fine. Even if it's something I've seen him do before, there's always something new that I missed.
Yeah, there's always something new. Last time he was here, he was showing us how to break the guard. And it was so silly how easy it became, and that I was so frustrated actually learning that.
I'm sure Keith will love to hear that. I'll make sure and tag him in this.
He's fantastic. I mean, the guy is awesome.
Yeah, I love him too. I love just meeting, hanging out with him. I've found the seminars I've been to, the ones that go over the basics, go over their foundations, and are just more of a relaxed seminar, are the ones I learn a lot more than, hey, you know, this is this cool new series of moves that I'm putting together, check it out kind of thing, because it's kind of harder to adapt it to what I do, right? I'm not one of those guys that can just like, oh, this is the new thing that everyone's doing, I'm going to jump into that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
But yeah, I've always been like, I've found like seminars were new to me when I moved out to Victoria, BC. I'd never done a seminar before. I've heard about them, and but growing up, I remember hearing about like seminars as in you went and you kind of just watched. You didn't do anything, right?
Right.
And but then when I started going to seminars out there and realized like, yeah, it's basically just a really long class with a special guest, like the instructor. Then I was like, oh yeah, this is cool, because like you're looking at the same kind of move but a different view, so you can get more detail. So I've always been a fan of it.
And that's what I like about Jiu-Jitsu. Like I came from a karate background, I guess you could consider that, where it's very stylized and you do a punch a specific way, and if you do it a little bit different, you're going to get chewed out by an instructor. You have to do it perfectly the way they're supposed to be done, including katas and everything. But then you look at Jiu-Jitsu, and we're all different people. Like your body type is different than mine and somebody else's, and then you got ladies that are much smaller, they don't have the same upper strength. And we all end up, after a number of years of training, we all end up having our own take on pretty much any move. Stuff that works for us a little bit better than it would work for somebody else. So it's always curious to watch somebody else do the same technique and see what you can take away from that.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of my goal on this journey I'm on right now of not so much as learning new moves, but learning the foundations that I have, seeing them through different eyes, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you've been in Canada for 25, 30 years?
Yeah, that's when I stopped counting.
Yeah. So
I don't know really.
So my last question to you is, since it's getting into the winter season in Canada, especially in Calgary, where it gets pretty cold, has there ever been a time, especially when you first moved here, where you're just like, you know what, enough of this, I'm moving back to Brazil?
Yeah, that's what happened first time we came out. It was back in 1978. We actually immigrated to Canada.
Yeah.
I was just 8 years old at that time, and it was all great. We came in spring, and then summer was good, and then winter came, and my parents decided to move back to Brazil. But it ended up being better than the decision to move back, because here we are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Canada is the greatest country in the world. I know Keith Owens is not going to agree with me. America's great.
Yeah.
No, but it's here's where we got the big moose, and we got a drama teacher as a prime minister. How much better can I get?
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah. There's a thing about that though, with those winters that whenever I was working in, like, living in Toronto and meeting people that had just moved to Toronto, that was always their complaint was like getting used to Canadian winters.
Yes. Yeah. Well, unless you're in Vancouver, right? And,
Yeah.
Toronto's not that bad. And the worst place in the world, I guess, would be Winnipeg.
Okay, that's I'm going there in 2 weeks.
Oh boy.
So, yeah. Well, it's been fun. Thanks again for everything. This has been a great interview. And until next time, I'll see you all on the mats. Us.